the economy and the climate and nature are not separate. A healthy planet will provide the healthy conditions for a healthy economy.
Being overwhelmed by scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions drives a constant fear of greenwashing. It can make your head spin, your message feel stuck in the gullet, and your business can look less confident by the moment. But imagine leading your industry with confidence, feeling so credible that you're sharing your impact with anyone who will listen, not just measuring your emissions, but developing actionable plans that cut costs, guarantee revenue growth, and secure top talent. That's what we're talking about today on Environmental with Dandelion. If this is your first time, hi, I'm your host and the chief cultivator here at Dandelion Branding. We are making sustainability part of mainstream conversations by sharing sustainability stories you don't want to miss on this podcast, Environmental with Dandelion, and by helping purpose-driven brands use their sustainability stories to create activists for their brands and their missions. If you're a little bit eco-curious, and I know that you are, your first step to making a sustainable change is showing the subscribe button some attention, because we think that shifting the paradigm starts with shifting your algorithm. My guest today is Adam Boita, the Chief Marketing Officer of Ecologi, which is UK's most trusted B Corp certified climate action platform. They help their customers measure, reduce, and report carbon emissions while they fund climate restoration. Incredible. Adam, thank you so much for being here.
Lovely to be here.
Can you please tell me the number one thing you think people should know about nature-based restoration and carbon credits?
I think the number one thing people need to know is that it's all part of a holistic strategy, and it's just one part, big important part, but just one part of the overall strategy, as you kind of outlined below there, making sure people are first and foremost measuring their emissions, thinking about how they're going to reduce them, then thinking about the restoration and offsetting piece, and also reporting on their progress, not only internally, but to stakeholders and the wider general public.
Great. That it's bigger than it seems. And honestly, it feels really big. Like looking through Ecologi, and just like I've been following Ecologi for a long time. We met face to face at Blue Earth Summit.
We did,
I
yeah.
was really excited to meet you there because I really like Ecologi. I like the way that you operate. And I know you've been operating in the climate or the carbon credit space in a while. And you're doing it in a way that I don't think is, like, for lack of a better word, like sleazy. Like I know that there's some like carbon credit stuff in the world that is hard to trust. And I appreciate the way that Ecologi does it so transparently. And I kind of want to hear your take on that. I feel like there's a lot, there's probably a lot there, but you know better than I do.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I think, firstly, carbon credits is just one of the many kind of services, I guess, that we offer our customers and our clients. But you're right, it has had a bad rap, rightly and wrongly, in some instances, I would say. And, the media has their part to play in that, both by highlighting projects that generally don't deliver what they're supposed to deliver. But then also, I think it can create this, I guess, atmosphere of scaremongering where you just shouldn't use carbon credits at all. And we would obviously argue and advocate against that. But you're right. It's about how do you trust projects in a sea of many projects that are out there. We like to think of ourselves as a trusted partner to customers, as I said, for every part of their climate journey, but specifically when it comes to compensating for their emissions as they're reducing them and funding high quality carbon credits and carbon offsets. We look at two things. First of all, we obviously follow the science, and we follow the Oxford principles by building people a portfolio that counts for, avoidance and the ratio between avoidance and removal credits, with focus on removal credits and hard durable removals towards the end of that portfolio timeline. But secondly, all in terms of the way that we select projects and how we select projects. So earlier in the year, we published a white paper, which is our setting the standard, which is effectively a carbon project assessment framework. We use all of the market leading rating agencies. So it's kind of, we call it the ratings of ratings. So we have like Allied Offsets, B Zero Carbon in there, Silvera, all the rating agencies. And we look at the projects on kind of three pillars: climate, nature, and people, and then two other aspects in terms of quality and risk. And that we score each of the projects based on those pillars and those two other dimensions, quality and risk. And that gives us an assessment score. And only projects that score over 80 are then eligible for funding on our platform. So that's the kind of rigor and due diligence that we go through for every project. And as you also said, we're very transparent as to which projects are on our website, which projects we funded. We have a trust and transparency section on our website, which also has our public impact ledger, where people can see all the credits that have been retired. So that's how we kind of deal with the carbon credit offset part of the business.
Quiet because I'm kind of like stunned. It's so intense.
It,
And I think it
I,
needs to
I
be.
leave that to the impact team. Sam Jackson, who's our director of climate science and impact, and Lucy Gemmell have been a big part of that. Obviously, Simon, our chief sustainability officer. It's been kind of a long time in the making, and it was incredibly well received within the industry. So much so that we're now working on the equivalent of that, which is a nature-based project assessment framework, so that you can have the same. We're just effectively documenting the same process that we go through, but for our nature-based projects, so tree planting or wildflowers, wetlands, that kind of thing, that don't have any credits associated with them, but they are nevertheless nature-based restoration with SDG co-benefits and alike. And so, we're kind of documenting our approach to that due diligence as well, so that you've both got both sides of the coin.
Cool. And maybe this is like I don't know, it's a business case question. But like, how do you quantify a nature-based restoration solution? Not from, from where I sit, nature restoration is fantastic. But for I imagine some of the people you work with are big corporations who don't have a huge CSR care. They're just doing it because it's good business. They're doing it because it's good business. Really, how do you quantify that for people when it's not based on a credit?
Well, I think, credits in some ways can be quite boring because it's a carbon number, and then you're offsetting it with a equivalent carbon number. But obviously, the projects that sit behind that still have great stories to tell in terms of what they are doing for people and the planet. And particularly, it's not just the planet, it's the people and communities that those projects support or surrounding. So I think whether it's nature-based or maybe it's carbon credit-based, there's always a good story to tell in terms of what is this project actually delivering on the ground for people and planet? What kind of SDG co-benefits does it also deliver? And so I think, a lot of the times for our customers, it is around what is the storytelling that we can do around these projects, the project origin, how long it's been going for, like I said, what co-benefits it has. So I think it's really that storytelling piece. We've got a great customer called GiftGaff in the UK, who are
Love them.
telecommunications. Yeah, they're brilliant. And they have their Up to Good fund, where they fund nature-based restoration as a percentage of their brand and kind of media spend for their campaigns. So much so that that's become a blueprint really for the kind of media marketing and brand industry, where the fund started off, I think, around with, say, 6 to 10 partners. It's now grown to 22. So it's involving the entire media ecosystem. So, for example, brands such as like Lad Bible, Lobster, Acast. Effectively, what happens is that the brand commits to a certain percentage of media spend, in this case, 0.1%. The media agency matches that, and then the media owners, so like a Lad Bible or a Snapper and Acast, they actually then contribute anywhere between 0.1 to 4%. And so you generate this fund off the back of marketing that's going to happen, but it also is marketing that's driven with a purpose. And then you can then tell the story of what's happened within that fund, what landscape has been restored, what wildlife has returned to that landscape as a result of that investment and that fund. So that is now starting to be rolled across, with other brands and other industries as a bit of a blueprint as to how you can take nature-based restoration, how you can bake it in to your everyday business operations, and then generate, nature restoration at scale.
It's really beautiful. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the reasons I think I wanted Ecologi to come on the podcast, because as you said, like, carbon credits are kind of boring.
very, very important. But carbon as a kind of
Yeah.
it's not. It's it is just a number, and I think that doesn't bring it to life for the audience that you're going to be talking about. If you're a B2C brand,
Yeah.
especially.
Like, I think you're like, I've offset this number, and it's very challenging to take that number and completely understand it, or really understand it at all. What does it even mean? Like, what does 1 ton of carbon look like? But what I think Ecologi does really well is share those stories and make it feel tangible for people to understand the impact that they're actually having, the impact that the businesses are having, or the business they support are having. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, and obviously, storytelling is important, and helping customers, making sure they're communicating that right way. We have quite legitimately people are worried about greenwashing, green hushing. We recently launched a sustainability brand campaign targeted at sustainability professionals, which was really seems to have hit a real note with them. It's about the fact that sustainability is the best job in the world, but they're caught between sometimes these impossible scenarios between greenwashing, green hushing, between being science backed but not being boring, between
Yep.
all of these dichotomies, speaking up but not too loudly, wanting to be ambitious but not too much, because otherwise you're maybe going against business growth, but you're also then trying to reduce emissions at the same time. And so, yeah, that's the dichotomy that people are often caught within. Um, but
Yeah.
but I do think those projects are great for storytelling. But I do think the the framework that we developed, which again is about trying to simplify the climate journey and really boiling it down to something that's memorable. Everyone has their take on it. Ours is reduce, restore, report. It's called the 3Rs framework, and it now underpins everything that we do, both internally and externally. So obviously within reduce, and the reason why we called it reduce is because it should be reductions first. Obviously that naturally means you have to measure, otherwise you can't reduce before you measure. You can't reduce what you can't measure, but it allows us to kind of talk about the journey in those three ways. And the idea is that it's cyclical. So you're constantly reducing, restoring, and reporting as you're traveling along your
Yeah.
journey to near-term targets 2030. It'll be 4 years away as of January 26, which is quite scary, but also I think it has just been this perceptual, for all the right reasons, deadline as to, are people hitting their near-term targets, with a view to then
Beautiful.
seeing how we go to 2040 or 2050, depending on when people have set their long-term targets. But by being able to constantly talk about how you're reducing, restoring, and reporting, that gives you a really, really consistent kind of framework. And particularly if you are a business that doesn't necessarily have SBTI validated targets, but they want to be SBT aligned, and they also want to think about what are the milestones that they are reaching along the way, it's a really, really nice framework to allow them to report back to the business, say, right, here's the next step, here's what we're doing now. And alongside that framework, we've developed certification, which we've just been researching recently, and thinking about how we could, certify people along different stages of that journey towards net zero, who maybe don't have other, bigger certifications that they've been working towards. Or if they do, they might see this as a nice stepping stones towards the bigger milestones of net zero.
So it is time for my favorite question in this show. But first, we're going to have a little mid-show reminder to our eco-curious friends out there that you can make a difference even if your role feels small in this big world. Just subscribing or liking on YouTube is a signal that these types of discussions are important, not just to you, but also to people like you. And that's a big deal because attention is the currency of 2026. Really, I think it's going to be the currency from here on out, but that's just me. So Adam, can you tell me what is the role that Ecologi plays in the transition to a more sustainable future?
Well, we started off as a consumer platform first and foremost, and it was the time of the rise of Spotify and Netflix. And the idea that our founder, Elliot, alongside his other co-founders had, was around, what happens if you could create the sustainability subscription that could equal that of Netflix and Spotify. And for the price of a coffee and a cake or a croissant at the time, you could fund climate action as an individual. And that's really what started the journey and started that what you call it, the impact for the overall sustainability transition that we so desperately need. Because of the growth there, that was then quite quickly flipped into a business proposition to say around, well, could you fund climate action on behalf of employees? And then that slowly started to grow the B2B side of the business. And then if you think about, the scale of the problem, um, it's definitely not all on consumers. Consumers can make better choices. But in terms of actually the scale that's needed, yes, obviously consumers advocating and taking action is a big part of the pie. But obviously businesses are key to reducing emissions and also helping restore the planet as well. I think the stat from the British Business Bank is that 50% of emissions in the UK come from SMEs. So they have a big role to play, and the private sector has a big role to play, particularly as the private sector can move quickly or quicker than
Yes.
government, for example, and is often 2 steps ahead of where government legislation and policy might come in. And so whilst businesses may also be asking government for more help or more grants or more incentives, or in some ways, sometimes more policy in order to enact change at a quicker pace. The flip side of that is actually those businesses that are building the business case for investment in sustainability and being part of that transition and setting net zero targets and getting their ship in shape, as it were, are often the ones that are building the business case where they've seen that actually, if you can position your business competitively for the low carbon economy, suddenly if you are a supplier to a much bigger enterprise who is now saying, unless you have SBTI validated targets or SBTI aligned targets, or you've have a net zero plan in place, we're no longer going to work with you as a supplier. Those people that have already taken that transition, have started on that journey, are now in a much better position to then have a successful business in the future. So we've kind of moved through this kind of, I guess, the sustainability Overton window of business cases, I guess. Whereas, previously people were talking about it's just good for the planet. Well, that's just not good enough. It's got to make business sense, right? What is the business case? How am I presenting this to my board? How am I presenting this as part of my overall plan? And yes, we run a climate commitment survey every year to 1,400 people in businesses to 1,000 FTE. And consistently, it's always been, competitive advantage, brand reputation, employee engagement, talent retention, all of those good things. And, people are starting to be able to quantify that within their own businesses, especially from an employment point of view. It's probably the most asked question is, what's your sustainability strategy for those employees that are potentially entering into that business? But now what I'm hearing a lot more in conversations within the sustainability circles, it is about minimizing risk and building business resilience, because the economy and the climate and nature are not separate. And the sooner that people realize that we will not have growth in the economy, and obviously there's talk of degrowth, and you can have that argument separately.
Yeah,
But
that's another podcast.
that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But you have to realize that a healthy planet will provide the healthy conditions for a healthy economy. There was that article written, I can't remember, it was from one of the leading insurance companies. And as soon as they are signaling, the canary in the coal mine, if you can't insure, particularly you've seen that sadly with the forest fires, if you can't insure your house, then you can't get a mortgage. And if you can't get a mortgage, then you can't buy a house. And so I think that there are going to be these legitimate risk and resilience tipping points that actuaries and lots of businesses will be looking at and thinking, okay, the business case is actually, will we have a business in 5 to 10 years? How can we build in that risk and resilience profile versus the benefits, which is the kind of the carrot dangling of more resilient business, more successful, competitively positioned, maybe gaining more market share over competitors, innovating on your products that are lower carbon than your competitors. All of these things start to add up. But I think we definitely notice a shift in terms of conversations around it's easier to have a risk and resilience conversation with the board than it is necessarily saying it's going to improve our brand reputation, or we might attract more talent, or we might do this. I think that's been the real flip that we've seen.
That's really interesting. Oh my gosh, there was so much there because, like you said, it's part of everything. You can't have a healthy economy without having a healthy climate. And I feel like that was a big part of COP30, which happened last month.
Mm-hmm.
And my last environmental episode that aired 2 weeks ago was about the overview of what actually happened. And this was a big part of what I talked about there too, was the more we transition to a more sustainable world, the more equal politically we see states and nations around the world. But one thing I found really interesting that you just mentioned is about making a better business case. And one of the things at COP30 that I thought was really interesting was how They're focusing on international trade as part of climate progress more than a hindrance now. And I feel like you just hit the nail on the head. Like if you're getting into business right now, or if you or if you are in business and you haven't started in the sustainability trend, like it's really in the next 10 years, you won't have a business if you're not focused on this because people won't want to work with you.
Yeah. And also, if you're a new business starting out, it's a lot easier. If you're a legacy business, it's harder to adapt, and if you are a new business, then it's easier to adapt. Saying that, startups and scale ups have enough issues actually getting their product market fit, without then thinking of sustainability as a layer on top of that. However, if
It
it's
shouldn't.
thought out, it shouldn't be an extra layer. It should be baked in from the start, and actually that's just the expectations of doing business now, and obviously hopefully still a key differentiator.
So we've talked a lot about storytelling. I think that I hear, you hear about carbon credits and I am in the bubble, so I also hear about nature restoration a lot, but
Yep.
something really stands out about ecology and kind of always has. So what would you say the storytelling secret of ecology is?
I think we've always tried to balance the emotional with the rational. You're never going to win over an audience with just facts, unfortunately. Um, and it needs to be told in a compelling and engaging way. I think, very early on, our brand does look quite different compared to other brands within our space. And the fact that we started off as life as a consumer brand, and that's certainly kind of my background in terms of consumer marketing. Used
Mm,
to work at PlayStation, worked at Absolute Vodka, and it was all about being part of aligning yourself with culture and delivering emotional storytelling that could connect with communities and different cultures and different target audiences. So we've definitely, it's only, I would say, in the last 5 years that B2B marketing has kind of woken up to the idea of borrowing from the consumer marketing playbook, building brand, and when we think about, the world that we've already entered, 12 months ago, none of us were using AI, and now it has just become part of our daily routine and
yeah.
integrated into a lot of our operations. But what that means is that, what is the defensible IP moat really in an AI driven world, and it does come down to how strong your brand is and how does it resonate with your customer or your consumer base. So we've always been very focused on brand campaigns, but also brand and storytelling is not just defined through yearly brand campaign video. It is also really defined through, particularly in our organization, the design of the website, the design of the product, how that all flows, how that all links up together. The virtual forest, that was one of the first people to kind of think about how do you visualize that for storytelling? How can you therefore make that impact that you're funding more shareable? 50% of our website traffic is to business and consumer profiles because they're public profiles and people can see them quite visibly. Great for SEO, obviously, and great for traffic, but also great for storytelling, virality, and rewarding people with badges when they've hit certain milestones, and then letting them share that with their followers or with their closest friends and family, if in the
Yeah.
case if they're one of our consumer subscribers. So.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing a great job. I think you I can't put it any other way. You really hit it, like, make it fun, make it engaging, make it something that you wanna a story that you want to share, a story that you want to tell.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah.
So, I think we could really talk about this all day and, all the flowers to ecology. I've been following you for a long time, and I really love it. So tell our audience how they can find you, where they can connect with you, or how they can join giving if you're doing consumer giving or giving a gift for the holiday.
Yeah. Well, you can contact me on LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/Adam Boita, or you can get hold of us at ecologi.com. It's ecology with an I, not a Y, as we always say. And hopefully, either you can, if you know what you're looking for, you can get involved with Ecologi straight away in terms of some of our self-serve products, some of our subscriptions, funding impact within our impact shop. But if you're a larger organization, either starting out in your journey or you're very mature in your journey, you need a specific part of your help, either in the reduce, restore, report area, then you can reach out to our team of climate experts, and hopefully we can add something to your already great climate strategies.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Adam, for being here. And thank you, everybody, for sticking around. I will see you in the new year. Can you believe it is the end of 2025. Where did this year even go? Happy holidays. Please take some rest. And if no one has told you recently, thank you so much for everything. You are doing enough. See you next time.